Welcome back to the second hour of the Velocity of Now with me, your host Thomas Sheridan, on the February of the 2nd, 2020, 2020, a palindrome as some obnoxious person with a 10-inch nail up their hole constantly reminded me of. I hope you enjoyed the first hour. It was a bit of crack. I'm letting off a bit of steam here, as I feel something like a man who's been liberated from a prison camp. Well, and then kind of put back into it, but has more control over it or something like that. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the first hour. It was a good bit of fun. I liked the We Are the World impromptu singing thing. That was kind of funny. But let's see, what can I talk about in the second hour? Well, I just saw an article there. I was talking about Beetlejuice or Belchagese, the star vanishing, and somebody posted an article from sciencealert.com. And it reminds me a lot of the Arthur C. Clarke story, The Thousand Names for God, which I read, I think I read the story on a VON many years ago when I used to be on Type 1 radio. And basically the story is that humanity, through supercomputers and development of knowledge, learns everything there is to know, and as soon as everything is known, the stars in the heavens begin to go out one by one. There was also an interesting theory within quantum mechanics, quantum theory, that the deeper we look into the universe, that we may be destroying it. And this kind of psychs in with that. This is from a magazine called Science, an online site called sciencealert.com, and with the very interesting headline, researchers have identified 100 mysteriously disappeared stars in the night sky. And this was published just before Christmas by someone called Mike, what's his name? McRae. And I'm going to read the article verbatim. Across the Milky Way, there are vacant spaces where a star once brightly shone. Some clues in a dramatic death or faded into retirement. Others simply moved into a new neighborhood. Not all vacancies have such convenient explanations. Some, though, were there one moment and gone the next, inviting speculation over rare types of star deaths, extreme astrophysics, and, of course, advanced alien technology. By comparing star catalogues dating back to the 1950s with more recent data sets, researchers with the vanishing and appearing sources during a century of observation project have identified around 100 bright dots that seem to have vanished without a trace. The search is an ongoing one for lead researcher Beatriz Villarroel and her colleague, one that started several years ago as part of a hunt for potential signs of alien intelligence. Finding an actual vanishing star, or a star that appears out of nowhere, would be a precious discovery, and certainly one include new astrophysics beyond what we know of today, says Villarroel, a theoretical physicist from Stockholm University. In an earlier study, Villarroel and her team compared the positions of some 10 million objects recorded in the US NATO Observatory Catalogue, UNSO, with their counterparts in the Sloan Digital Sky Survey, SDSS. They were left with about 290,000 missing objects, most of which could easily be accounted for on closer inspection. Eventually they found a single star that genuinely seemed to have disappeared, and even that discovery came with lingering doubts. It was an intriguing find, but hardly constituted compelling evidence for new kinds of astrophysics. In this later study, they compared 600 million objects in the USNO catalogue with a collection put together by the University of Hawaii's Pan-STAR system. The naval catalogue spans around 50 years of sky surveys, capturing details of the entire sky in 5 colours down to a visual magnitude of about 21. That's extremely dim, by the way. The cosmic objects in the Pan-STAR data release include slightly dimmer objects, down to the magnitude of roughly 23 as compared to the SDSS's 22. Having more stars to compare means potentially more missing stars, while capturing objects of a lower magnitude means making extra sure that nothing is sitting in the star's place. The comparison then revealed that 151,193 candidates for missing stars. This number was then whittled down to 23,667 possibilities by widening the search field, cutting away stars that seemed to have moved farther than expected. That short list was visually inspected, excluding around 18,000 images that were messed up by flaws or artifacts. Lastly, the team removed images where the missing star was towards the edge of the field, just to reduce risk of any false positives. One final sweep using yet another method for comparison removed other possible flaws in data collection or unclear results that left 100 dark shadows where a star once shone. When a star dies, it usually goes out with a bright shout as a supernova, or quietly fades into a soft glowing ember like a white dwarf. They don't tend to just stop shining. There could be some clues in the fact that the pool of candidates were, in general, a little redder in colour than the typical USNO catalogue object and were generally faster moving. Working it out will take further research. We are very excited about the following up on the 100 red transients we found, says Villarole. There are plenty of explanations that need exploring before we can be confident this represents anything exotic, something the team hopes to accomplish with citizen science projects. One possibility is that the object occasionally flares enough to be seen before dimming again a few magnitudes. Another explanation, although very unlikely, is that they're just all scratches after all and never existed to begin with. It could also be a dull star we assumed was further away and has just moved too far away to be noticed. A more exciting thought is that a few might be super rare failed supernovas forming black holes without the fireworks display. As cool as that would be, it's a stretch to think that would explain all the observations. If the disappeared stars turned out to be nothing more than these things, turned out to be none of these things, we may need to entertain new physics. We believe that they are natural, if somewhat extreme, astrophysical resources, says Martina Lopez Corredoria from the Instituto de Astrofísica de Canaries in the Canary Islands. This is another explanation, the one we'd like to be true, but can't take seriously until we have a lot more evidence. Aliens could be covering up these stars to absorb their light, converting it into useful energy before shedding it as low-grade radiation, or the initial stars might be short-lived, intense signals from alien technology. In moments like this, we can all let our imaginations run a little wild, even if the researchers are hesitant. But we are clear that none of these events have shown any direct signs of being ETI, extraterrestrial intelligence, says Cora Doria. We might just be what the aliens want us to think. The research was published in the Astronomical Journal. Now, a few things, first of all, with this, is that it discounts these ideas that the universe is observed through subjectivity, and maybe these stars don't exist when we don't pay attention to them. For instance, suppose on Earth, in a quantum sense I'm talking about now, because of the movie in the 80s, Beetlejuice, there was huge emphasis on that word Beetlejuice, and therefore the star shone in the sky. In recent times that movie has been forgotten, and perhaps through some kind of, this is my theories now, my waffling, I'm not saying it's a hard theory, just say for instance that quantum coupling took place between human consciousness and the star Betelgeuse as a direct result of the affection and the love that many people had for the movie Beetlejuice. In recent years, the movie Beetlejuice has lost its status in society. It is not as well loved or as famous as it once was. Consequently, is the star, through some kind of quantum coupling, dimming in the heavens for the same reason? I strongly believe that astrology is true in some sense, that we are definitely connected to the cosmos. As above, so below. But it's a feedback loop. It's not essentially that the stars maintain our destiny, that we are in a symbiotic dance, a tandem with these objects in the sky by means of things such as quantum coupling. What is the observation at the end of the day? That's the first thing I want to add to this article. The second thing I'd like to add to this article is a growing phenomena we're seeing more and more in mainstream science and in mainstream media, is that they're shoving the aliens thing down our throat. Now we've got to ask ourselves, why are they suddenly open to aliens? And more importantly, why are they suddenly open to the idea of something I do believe, and I've always believed for a very long time, since I was probably 11, well, maybe older, that aliens are not necessarily, well, in terms of the ones we experience on Earth through abductions and so on, are not necessarily spacemen from other planets arriving in crafts. That they're the same, if you've seen my Demons documentary, they're the same phenomena as fairies, the jinn, grey aliens, demons, interdimensionals, aliens, angels. They're all the same thing. That we culturally encapsulate these ideas in what we expect them to be. Prior to the 1940s, when people saw strange objects and lights in the sky, they saw them as religious symbols. While after Roswell, which is absolutely a psyop, people were conditioned to believe, because of Cold War imperatives, that it was crashed alien spaceships that landed in the United States, and the United States had alien technology to protect its citizens from the commies, who had just detonated a very powerful hydrogen bomb, much to the shock of many Americans. This belief in Americans needing spaceman technology, or else the spacemen would come to America because they would be more in favour of truth, freedom, mom and apple pie than they would be in front of Bolsheviks, which they should be if they have any intelligence, to be truthful. And therefore Americans were safe because they had spaceman super technology, and this has been basically pushed for decades by the likes of Stephen Greer and other these people, Lazar, who claimed to have been part of the military-industrial complex and saw alien technology. All of a sudden, out of the blue, we're bombarded with aliens non-stop these days. It's not been like this since the 70s. When I was a kid in the 70s, there was I'm talking about a young kid now, but I was still in like junior high school and finishing primary school. I was reading UFO books, and they were produced in enormous numbers. Enormous numbers. And we're back to that again, and it's websites this time. But this time, the mainstream, and in particular science, seem very entertaining of the idea of aliens being around or coming or visiting or contact is coming. Now people will say, well, listen, look, they have the US Navy has said they saw this or saw that, filmed this or filmed that. But you can't trust any government source, whether it's a policeman. This is what I always find amazing about people, alien researchers, that they don't trust the government until a policeman says he saw a spaceship, or a government general says he saw a space, or Jimmy Carter. That's the least people you should be trusting. I was talking to my friend down in Cork the other day. We were talking about the UFO thing and its relationship to consciousness, and he brought up the thing that I think I brought up on VON years ago. I've sort of spoke at some point. Certainly Jacques Vallée spoke about this in his books, that Betty and Barney Hill were an interracial couple at the height of the civil rights troubles in the United States. And therefore, it would be not unsurprising that their consciousness developed alien space beings that would abduct them, that didn't have an interest in race, to make them feel subconsciously better, almost like a dissociative, compensatory comforting created by the neuroses and terrors of the psyche. Like the same way people have religious visions. You saw at the end of that movie, in the middle of that movie, near the end of the movie, The Witch, the young boy, Caleb, had a vision of Jesus. That the mind compensates by putting these things out there. And that's why I always thought the Betty and Barney Hill thing was most likely the answer to that. That's not to say they're lying, they're telling the truth. I met Travis Walton at an event in Texas a few years ago. I looked him in the eye, and that man was telling the truth, absolutely 100 sincere. Though I already knew that from reading Fire in the Sky. Nobody sets up a phony UFO abduction experience with the potential of your friends being charged with murder and the disappearance of your body. And remember, they all passed lie detector tests. And only one of them, I think, said it was a fraud. And everyone says it's because he was afraid he was getting ridiculed. You know what people are like, cowards. You know, they always say the most treacherous of all human beings is a frightened and timid little man. As I found out well in my life in recent times. The most devious, treacherous, and unreliable, dangerous thing is a frightened little man. And that's what that character was in that. There's another aspect to the Travis Walton thing, bringing it back to the fairies and so on, that they were chopping down native and ancient woodlands in the Pacific Northwest. Did they invoke the wrath of the American or the Native American fairy folk? Of course, you know me, I believe that Bigfoot is also part of the fairy experience. It's not a gorilla or a human primate. It's another kind of entity that manifests in that form. They will appear in whatever you expect them to appear as. And so they're pushing this stuff big time. You have to be very careful. Oh, they're saying this, it must be true. Oh, they're saying that, it must be true. One of the most plausible conspiracy theories I can think of is Operation Bluebeam. Mainly because it has happened before with Roswell, and it happened before with Rendlesham Woods. The military said it happened, so it must be true. You know, and you never trust these sources, never trust a word they say or anyone connected to them. All the years I've done talks and done events, I've had people come up to me and say things like, you know that famous story that David Icke tells about the guy who was in the CIA or something that had like a plastic container of poison on his system, and if he does anything he's not told, he's killed by it. I've met numerous types like this, fellas telling me that they were, you know, in the CIA or they saw aliens. I ignore everyone last of them because every last one of them is a fantasist. Unless they can produce really hard evidence, like the man who told me he guarded Rudolf Hess, I'll believe them. But you meet them all the time, and you can't trust any of them. Some of them are quite deluded people. They may be believing what they're telling you themselves, but they can't produce any evidence. They just can't. And like the flat earthers, when you show them the truth or you show them the contradiction, they become like autistic children who cannot rationalize something, and they start screaming and shouting and run away. You get a lot of that kind of thing. That's why this thing. But I'm a great believer in the whole alien UFO thing. I totally believe that when most people see UFOs, they're giving sincere reports. If there's talking about alien abductions, many of them are telling us the truth, but they're being told through a system designed to prejudice them that this is what they experience. And rather than being saying, just sit back and allow the experience to ferment within your consciousness. And this is why I'll always have great respect for Whitley Strieber. He didn't call them aliens, despite massive pressure from his publishers. He called them visitors. And in the second book, Transformation, he directly compared them to the alien abduction experience of the fairies and the fairy abduction experiences of the Celtic world. So again, another article where they're shoving in this stuff that aliens are coming or aliens are there. Is it Project Bluebeam? I don't know. Is it real aliens that they know about and are getting us ready? I don't know. But I can tell you something. Whatever the mainstream presents, I won't believe any of it. Even if I'm standing under a cloud with a UFO above me, you see what they can project now in the sky. You can see what they're capable of in terms of that. I was down, and the mass hypnosis is an amazing thing. I was down in Cork there, and I went to the famous place called Ballyspittle. Now, Ballyspittle is where the famous statues of the Virgin Mary were supposed to have moved around, or moved in the 1980s. It's actually a very interesting and very beautiful vibe in this place. Now, I know someone who said he saw the statues move, but then he was an atheist and he wrote it off as the power of the human mind under suggestion and mass hypnosis is incredible. You get whipped up and things. And he was actually a good way to put it, because he wasn't far from the truth. And I brought up, maybe it was like a quantum thing. He said, yeah, it's possible, but it's more likely to be that I imagine it because of the intensity of the experience, which would be the same thing when you think about it. Now, I'll be making a film about, I got some footage down there on that for the Room 313 channel. I do not want to go into it very deeply, but I have found the connection between that, Fatima in Portugal, and Lourdes in France regarding the jinn, and that will be explained in the film when it comes out. So they're really pushing the stuff in our face. They're really shoving it into our face. We're really being told, here comes the aliens are coming, here comes the aliens are coming, or the aliens are here, we get ready for them, or science accepts this, and this is after decades and decades and decades of ridicule. Is science changing? I don't think so. Is it being more open to things like interdimensionals, perhaps? Could be, but remember, we live in an age where C333 holds dominion over things like Facebook and the electromagnetic spectrum. Don't be surprised if you hear a funny noise during this part of the segment of the show, like in the Jimmy Savile one. But the dominion that these entities hold over the internet would not have a vested interest in having discussions made about them unless they wanted people to be fearful of them, and that would feed them. Remember, I always say to you, observe, recognize, don't feed them. Don't feed them with fear. And so there's nothing to suggest that all these scientists are C33 infected through their massive computer networks, or we're dealing with something like the jinn. The jinn is a whole other thing. People say to me, what's the jinn? Is it like, no, it appears to be a whole other thing, like another being on this planet. Another race. They're interdimensional in the sense that they're almost like a plasma golem. That's the best way I could put them. Speaking of golems, we're planning a tour of magical Bohemia and megaliths in Austria and Bohemia in September with myself and Maria Wheatley. We haven't figured out the dates yet, but we're going to put together an unbelievable package of magic, megaliths, mythology, and of course Maria's things of, again, the esoteric, dowsing and all this stuff, and it should be amazing. So keep your time open in September, at the first couple of weeks in September, and I'll have more details on that. It's provisional now. I'm sticking it out there into the water to see if there's much interest, but it should be, I can guarantee you, if it pans out what we have planned, it'll be the trip of a lifetime. Visits to megaliths that almost no one has visited yet, and also you'll be in the world of the Golem and Dr. D and Edward Kelly. Anyway, so yeah, we have to be careful on the source. Again, the great thing is always to observe, look around, and then when you feel like you have a real sense of it being one way or another, hold on to it, but don't be steadfastly fixative to it. Nothing in life is pure black and white, except the digital jinn. Everything else is a bandwidth and cycles of grey. Peaks and troughs. Always remember that. What's reality today may be fantasy tomorrow. What's fantasy tomorrow may be reality today. It goes on and on. Always be open for new information. If evidence is presented to believe in things you don't believe in, and it's there, consider it. Consider it. I'm very suspicious of the whole alien thing for numerous levels. To me, there's always a purity in the initial engagement with something. Your first impressions of a person, a dream you had about a person that didn't seem what you'd previously thought about them before that manifested in them later on. The first a music you first heard that instantly I was listening to old Iron Maiden there, the original with Paul Di'Anio. I can remember when those two albums came out, and the songs like Purgatory and Sanctuary, it was like a punk rock metal, and those albums are fantastic to me. When I heard Iron Maiden post Paul Di'Anio with Bruce Dickinson, it just sounds like try-hard metal opera, show tunes. He even sings like a West End or a Broadway singer. The way he goes up in scales, come to the hills. It's like a Cats or something. But you hear the old stuff with Paul Di'Anio on albums like Killers. You hear the real Iron Maiden, the Iron Maiden that grabbed you, and that's because that was the initial truth that came. A band that had no money, nothing, on the road, just had a great plan to produce a certain kind of music, and got out there and did it. And I guarantee you, when the history of Iron Maiden is written, you will find more people preferring, in the end, the Paul Di'Anio Iron Maiden over the Bruce Dickinson Iron Maiden, because when you hear both, the initial stuff hits you at a deeper level. That's why it's so important. The first impressions of things are important. So when someone, like I see how people are trapped into things like the flat earth and the mud flood. At first they go, what? I don't believe this. But then they'll be given, because they have a lack of knowledge into certain things, or have a small world view in the case of many of the flat earthers, they'll say one thing, explain how compasses in the southern hemisphere still point north. And then they'll go, I never knew that. And the reason why they point north is because the stone that's in them is magnetized by the northern hemisphere, not by the southern. It's nothing to do with the earth being flat. If you take the magnetic stone from the southern hemisphere, it will point south. It's just that most compasses are made in the northern hemisphere. It's like the thing, like I get a lot of shit because I believe the moon landings happen. Why? Because I read that 14 times issue when it first came out in the 90s, and yeah, it blew my mind. I was like, what? This can't be real. Maybe they did fake the whole lunar thing. And then, over the years, every question that was posed by Dad or posed by me was effectively answered to the point where, yeah, they went to the moon. They went to the moon. And things like that were actually, should I say, the doubts in my head were born out of my ignorance rather than being a fact. I didn't know enough. Like in the year, I didn't know enough about rocketry, and I would say things like, well, how if space is a vacuum, how do rockets propel forward if there's no air to push against? And then you realize, well, that's Newton's third law of motion, the equal and opposite reaction. If it's pushing to the inside chamber of the rocket, that is the force needed to propel the rocket through space. Little things like you learn it and you learn and you learn it, and eventually you realize that the doubts that you had were 99% ignorance. But then there are real mysteries as well. Of course, there are some flat earthers that are out that just no hope for them. They think that the ocean should fall off the bottom of the earth because they think that the atmosphere, the gravity is in the cosmos. This is why a lot of them end up with like. And I had one fella I've known for years. I've known him for years on Facebook, and I met him a couple of times for friends. A lovely fella. I got on great with him. And all I did was show him how his flat earth stuff was wrong. And he blocked me on Facebook for that reason. I mean, there was no need for that. I wasn't rude to him because I liked the guy. No one else was rude to him. He was just shown, no, you're wrong about that. He would say things like, if the space station is travelling at 18,000 miles an hour, how come I can't stick a cup of coffee outside my car window when I'm driving at 30? I said, because there's no atmosphere in space to push against your hand while you're holding the coffee. You're not feeling any motion. Momentum is not the same thing. Acceleration and momentum are not the same thing. And it was just like to see decent people do things like that, block you for something stupid like that. I don't understand it. I mean, I just keep asking questions. And the same thing with the UFO thing, the alien thing. I'm not, like I said, if the UFO was in the sky floating in front of me, and there was people underneath holding cans of Coke saying, "I want to teach the world to see," this whole thing, "We are one," I'd be extremely skeptical, because we've all known that was a thing as almost like space communism. Especially now, people so locked into their phones, people so locked into the scrying mirrors of their iPhones and their Androids non-stop. That's where they look all the time. They've already been trained by the digital jinn to become saturated into the matrix, the new matrix. And that makes people very susceptible. When I had my Facebook account cancelled last week, 2 weeks ago, I actually had a good laugh. I got loads of hobbies and things like that done. In fact, that's going to be my new resolution on Facebook. I'm not going to spend as much time on it as I did, because I realised how much time I was wasting. So I was able to do like a hobby stuffs and do a few other things I needed doing that I've been putting off, because people, that's another thing, I'm not going to be answering every message I've ever sent in Facebook ever again. I've given away too much of myself that way over the years. I put out an enormous amount of stuff for free. Look at these Vons, look at all the other stuff I do. Don't be asking personal service anymore. You're not going to get it. Nothing personal. It's just I've given enough. Search through the archive of stuff and you will get it. I was just looking at some fashion show where that girl is wearing a skirt and it says "fuck Trump" in gold letters. Hasn't got the basic understanding, the profane in action. What she's doing is powering Trump. What does "fuck Trump" mean? Well, fuck him. You have sex with him. So she's a sexy girl, and she has the Trump part between her crotch, rubs it, and it's written in gold, "Glamoury and charge," and that goes right into building his legend. The way you stop giving power to someone you hate, dislike, or want out of power is to ignore them. By giving them your attention, whether it's love or hate, you're charging their persona. When you charge their persona with your psychic energy, you're creating charisma. And that's why certain people have charisma in spades. Not because they developed it themselves directly, it's because other people have charged them like a car battery running down. You put a charger on it and it charges them. And it's the one thing that people just don't seem to get into their heads. Energy goes where attention flows, and then they spend all their time hating on a politician or hating on a celebrity, and all they're doing is feeding their charisma. Now it's not the same thing as criticizing their work, but when it's personal, when it's hatred, when it's slanderous, all you're doing is pouring your life energy into building the legend and the mystique of the individual. And it's the same thing with the aliens thing. Now, like with the Quran's on 333 thing, I say, don't be sitting there looking at your computer screen or your phone going, "Oh, the digital jinn is inside there. The digital jinn is there, they're getting me." Just be aware. Switch it off. Switch it off. Like I said, you can monitor psychic weather. 3 a.m. wherever you are, you'll switch it on and you will see that's when the animal torture videos are shown. That's when the videos of people having their heads chopped off. The reason is it's why it's 3 a.m. everywhere is because that's the part of the time on your where you are in the world that you're furthest from the magnetic influence of the sun as well as the sun's rays, and you're in total and absolute darkness. That's why it is the true witching hour. The magnetic fields are different and therefore it affects your brain. Your brain is affected, and therefore the veil opens up, and forces try to enter you. The people who show animal slaughter porn videos at that time, or anything that's like that, what the entity is doing is harvesting life energy off people suddenly being shocked by these videos that this infected individual is doing. I know people that were once normal people that, because of digital jinn infection, are now gone. Their old personality is gone and will never come back. Never come back, because the digital jinn and its agency in the form of individuals who work on its behalf have sucked them into a lifestyle and a world and conditions that have completely destroyed them as a human being. And you see it all the time with the flat earthers and the mud flooder types. We saw it with the freemen of the land types. We saw them with that, didn't we? Oh, that with the freeman on the land thing was a classic example of the digital jinn in action. About, what was that, like 7, 8 years ago? I do not consent. Don't stand in. I do not recognize this court. Send receipts to. That was the greatest load. Black's law, the greatest load of bullshit. Common courts. I'm down to greatest load of bullshit. And the digital jinn got inside the weak, got inside the frightened, got inside the addicted, and had them destroy their lives, destroy their families, for a belief in something that ultimately, it's okay to look into it, it's okay to check it out, it's okay to see if there's something in it can work for you, but when you see there has not been one single freeman of the law of the land who has gotten away with it, who has not gone to prison, lost their families, lost their minds. And then they have these same people. I notice in every case these people will always have addiction problems. Chain smokers, potheads, alcoholics. In every case, that made them so easy for them to be sucked into the digital jinn. Oh, all your problems are over now. You just become a free man off the land and say, I do not consent. And when a policeman stops you in a car saying, I'm not driving a car, I'm travelling in my conveyance. The stupidity of all that stuff. Endless videos of some of them nearly getting killed while they're by cops while they're screaming, I do not consent. It doesn't work. None of them ever get away with it. I was also talking to my friend there in Cork the other day there about so many people who have been on this alternative media scene who have just vanished. They're just gone. They seem to have a big flash in the pan. People are sharing their videos, friending them on social media, telling them they're fantastic every 5 seconds. Then they get away with it for a while. They get a little bit of fame in alt media, and then you never hear about them ever again. Like the Seinfeld says, who are these people? Who are they? And there's so much of that over the years. I mean, I'm one of the few that's actually stood for the long term and still here. One of the very few. Many others have vanished, really vanished. Others have had big profiles in the past and are barely have anything now. And not by choice or anything like that. There's literally people got fed up listening to them. Others have imploded, but it always seems to be the ones who have a big bang, they arrive, and then they just fade away. They just fade away because everyone's looking for a solution. Everybody's looking for a solution. Be interesting to see. I think anyone who's lasted long in this, with the exception of someone who's like a massive megalomaniac, they deserve a lot of credit because all the shit you get from it. But they deserve that, for the survival in it. Because I don't know how people like David Icke have managed it. Really don't know how he managed it. The guy must be built of steel or something like that. But that's probably why he's got his reward in the end for all his years of sticking at it. He's and I know I'd made fun of the whole thing, like David said the reptile, I'm not talking about like him so much in that stuff. It's the kind of the mindless follower. Damn it, they're reptiles. And if someone came along tomorrow, they would believe exactly what they said. Those types who actually supported those ones who show up, appear, and vanish, and never hear from them ever again. And again, you know, there's no safety in this stuff. No safety at all. Because you don't know what the interface is. You sit there on your social media. You sit there on your YouTube and you watch a video about something that's like really intrigues you. Something controversial. Something about some conspiracy. Seems terribly exciting. The individual delivering it may even have the best of intentions and be perfectly honest and sincere in what they're saying. But the digital jinn is always, always the interface between you and them. You're not sitting there talking to a person, looking at them face to face. That's why events are so good. People can go there and talk to the person face to face and see what kind of person they are. You're a third party, just like in The Shining. A third party exists on the interface, on the Terminator. I always talk about the idea of the Terminator, that point between day and night. Well, it's the same thing with the internet. The Terminator exists between you as an interface, you and the information you're receiving as an interface. And emotions, how it affects you emotionally, is always the key to the presence of the digital jinn. I know that sounds cynical, but if you see something that's emotional, there was this woman I knew in Ireland here. She used to get all emotional when she'd see someone talking, making a speech about freemen of the land, or all emotional when someone like David Icke said something, and then now all emotional when, what was his name, Tommy Robinson was released from prison or whatever. That emotion is the tug of the digital jinn grabbing your energy. That's how they get you. They get you all emotional. Now, obviously, if you see something that's shocking, like I saw the other night from China, I'm not going to go into it, you cannot help it. You're a human being with feelings, and it's immediately stolen from you. But if you switch it off right away and immediately change your mind to something like listen to a music you know, or what I do is I go to YouTube and I watch scenes from my favourite comedy movies like Caddyshack, Wayne's World, The 40-Year-Old Virgin, and many other films that, you know, Zoolander had me in stitches over the years, and that makes me forget the harvesting that was done by the digital jinn. Otherwise, the digital jinn fears one thing more than anything else: neutrality. Neutrality is to the digital jinn what being ignored is to a celebrity. It cuts off the power supply. When you approach information neutral and how it's presented with neutrality, you're able to objectively understand it, because then, rather than the digital jinn controlling the narrative between you and your cognition, what happens is the dialogue then begins between you and your subconscious mind. And what is the ultimate catalyst of your conscious mind and your subconscious mind when confronted with these concepts and ideas? Intuition. The digital jinn wants your intuition shut down and your emotions and your reactions, your visceral reactions, put to the fore. Because when they're at the fore, the one thing that shuts off the conscious mind is the sensory overload. This is why it's used by cults to brainwash people, military interrogation, while they put people in containers and play death metal music at incredible volume for hours on end, eventually the subconscious mind gives up and the conscious mind is left as an automaton, a flesh golem. And that's what the digital djinn is doing with the internet. It wants to do with the internet. Sensory overload. You look at these people like these SJWs, like the one I made fun of in the first hour, who shut down my account on Facebook, and you all know what they look like. And the reason why they look the way they are, don't know who they are as people, are filled with anger, is because their subconscious minds have been switched off and replaced with reactionary feelings, reactionary thoughts. It's not the context, it's not the subtext, it's how it makes them feel. And if they have feelings that make them feel bad, that means it is bad. So for instance, it's like the Mary Poppins song, a spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down. In their case, it's a spoonful of offensiveness and being triggered makes the medicine go away. What happens is they get sick. Their psyche gets sick because they're not confronting the truth. And the truth is the shadow. We all have it. No one is impervious to it. We all make mistakes with it. It rules us. It damages us. It liberates us. But it's there. It is there as the modifier in order to create a score sheet of our impulsions and our behavior when confronted with challenging situations. It becomes the arbiter of the solutions to escape that. And that's what a lot of these people who are like that, well, they all are like that. You saw that conference a while ago, the Socialist Workers of America, Communist Party of America, having the meeting where they're doing jazz hands, and it was ridiculous. Can we stop using gender language? Yes, the comrade, we have to do what he says. Can we not? Can we stop talking about the sky being blue? It's racist. The sky can be black. Yes, and you see what that leads to? Utter madness. And that was a fantastic learning video, because we saw the mind inside these people, and there is no mind in there. It's all about avoidance of feelings that might challenge them. And this eventually leads to gulags and mass graves. Have no doubt about this. Those purple-haired blobs on Facebook who are community standards people and people like that are the same ones in Pol Pot's world who executed men, women and innocent children, the same ones who are Bolsheviks in the NKVD killing rooms, because their feelings are being annoyed. The ultimate annoyance to their feelings is other human beings. How they solve that problem is by shutting them off on social media. But in reality, if that didn't exist, they would be putting a revolver to the back of their head and blowing their brains out over a lime pit. We saw it with the Stalin purges, the NKVD Trotskyite slaughters in Tartar. Tartar, of all places, the Tatars. We saw it with the Nazis and socialism, National Socialism. We saw it in Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge. This is what happens when you let feelings be the arbiter of the human consciousness and you lose wisdom. Because wisdom requires self-reflection. Instead of them looking in the mirror and saying, like I saw it this week, you see these women who are usually women, but there's men too, who are very, very overweight to the point, and young ones too, in their early 20s. And they'll say things like, I'm not fat, it's body image in the mainstream is wrong. No, darling, you're not well. You cannot run to the shop. If your house was on fire, you wouldn't be able to run out fast enough. The skinny girl that you says has biased body image is the one who survives. Not because the firemen think she's a sexy girl and want to save her. It's because she can get down the stairs and get out before the carbon monoxide suffocates her like it's going to suffocate you. Your feelings are dangerous in that regard. The Frankfurt School types, the cultural Marxists, are all encouraging this kind of carry on. They're all encouraging this kind of carry on because it makes people useless. Absolutely useless. And when you're useless, you're compliant. You're compliant because you're a frightened little man or nervous little woman. Never, ever allow them to make you frightened of things that are ephemeral, incorporeal, dogmatic, philosophical. Because they will do that, they will rob the song from your heart. Anxiety and fear is not the same thing. So thank you for that. There's a second hour of the show up already. It's gone very fast. I would like to do a third hour, but I have to do something else tonight. I hope you enjoyed this. Again, look at the links below. www.moss Upon Stones. I prefer if you buy a book. If you want to help me make better films from Beyond Room 313, and they're already pretty good, check out the re-edited version of the Sintra Code and also Liber Providence if you haven't seen it. It was up for an award, but it didn't get nominated for the final thing in the end. But that was just enough just to be asked. And there's, that's all down there. There's now a Thomas Sheridan fan club page of sorts set up by some very nice people. Big love and big shout out to all of them on Facebook that you can join if you're still on Facebook. But remember, don't run away necessarily in terror. Use these things as your bitch. That's how you make a bitch of them. Use them for your own good. Use them as a tool. Not as not as something to oppress you. There's lots of ways of doing subversion. Don't look at the French. They're achieving nothing with their riots in the street. But you'll achieve more by being a consciousness insurgent, slipping below the radar. Take care, look after yourselves. Ave Lucifer, and long live the horn gods. Feck 'em if they can't take a joke, and I'll be back with a VON sooner than you realise. God bless. I love you all. And let's make this life the best life we can make it for ourselves and our loved ones. Good night.